The gavel cracked down like thunder and the room exploded in applause. Sold, $6,000 for charity. Brandon Hale's voice boomed through the microphone, his perfect smile gleaming under the chandelier lights. I stood from my seat, heart racing with excitement as I made my way to the stage. A vintage Rolex Submariner, I'd been searching for one for years. This was it. My hands trembled slightly as Brandon placed the watch in my palm, and that's when everything changed. The weight was wrong, too light. The crown felt loose under my thumb. I lifted it closer to my eyes and my stomach dropped. The engravings were blurred. The rotor rattled when I tilted it. This wasn't vintage. This wasn't even real. Everyone was watching, so I forced a smile and nodded my thanks. But my jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached. I just paid $6,000 for a $200 fake, and Brandon Hale knew it. I could see it in the way his smile lingered just a second too long, in the satisfaction that flickered across his face. He'd scammed me, in front of everyone, at a charity event. I couldn't let it go, not yet. I leaned toward Brandon and kept my voice low. Do you have the authentication papers, just for my records? His laugh cut through the noise like shattering glass. Everyone turned. Buddy, he said, loud enough for the front 3 rows to hear, if you can't tell quality when you're holding it, maybe you should stick to department stores. Laughter rippled through the crowd, not loud but enough to make my face burn, enough to make me feel small. I stood there frozen, the fake Rolex heavy in my hand, while people whispered and smirked. Brandon turned away, already moving on to the next item, dismissing me like I was nothing. The chuckles from the audience felt like acid in my chest. I walked back to my seat, head down, hands shaking. That's when something inside me shifted. This wasn't just about the money anymore. This was about respect, about justice. Brandon Hale had humiliated me in public, stolen my money, and walked away like a king. I sat down, still clutching the fake watch, and made a promise to myself. This wasn't over, not even close. I sat in my car for 20 minutes in the parking garage, staring at the watch under the dashboard light. Every detail screamed counterfeit. The crown alignment was crooked. The serial number was stamped too shallow. The second hand didn't glide, it ticked in jerky movements. I'd spent $6,000 on garbage at a charity event. The word charity echoed in my head, mocking me. I pulled out my phone and started typing notes, every detail I could remember. The way Brandon avoided showing paperwork, the vague descriptions during bidding, the way he handled finances personally instead of through the hosting organization. Then a thought hit me like ice water. If he did this to me in front of everyone without hesitation, how many others had he scammed? How many people walked out of that room tonight with fake items, too embarrassed to speak up? I opened my browser and searched for Brandon Hale's previous charity auctions. There were dozens. Events across Miami, Fort Lauderdale, even Palm Beach. High profile, glamorous, always for charity. And suddenly I realized something terrifying. This wasn't a one-time con. This was a system, and I'd just funded it. The auction had been live-streamed. I found the archive still online and downloaded it immediately, every second of it. I spent the next 3 hours rewatching the footage, taking screenshots, logging timestamps. Designer handbags sold without certificates. Watches with verified authenticity but no serial verification shown. Rare sneakers auctioned off with suspiciously vague provenance. Every single high-ticket item was presented with confidence and zero documentation, and the audience ate it up. The chat log was even more revealing. Hundreds of comments scrolled past during the stream. Is this legit? No receipts, lol. Seems sketchy but whatever. That bag looks off to me. Even the viewers knew something was wrong, but the energy in the room, the pressure, the spotlight, it all made people ignore their instincts. I kept watching frame by frame and noticed something else. Every invoice shown on screen bore Brandon's personal signature, not the charity's logo, not a co-signer. Just his name, scrawled in confident loops. He designed the entire system to insulate the charity from liability while keeping all the control and all the money for himself. I saved everything to 3 separate drives. This was evidence, and I was just getting started. The next morning I called the hosting charity. My voice was calm, friendly even. Hi, I attended last night's auction. Just wanted to confirm my donation receipt for tax purposes. There was a pause. The coordinator sounded confused. Oh well, Mr. Hale handles all the financial processing directly. We provided the venue and our name, but he manages the logistics and proceeds. You'd need to contact him for receipts. My stomach dropped. So the charity doesn't process the payments. Another pause. Not directly, no. He collects everything, deducts expenses, and sends us a donation afterward. It's been a very successful partnership. I thanked her and hung up. My hands were shaking. They hadn't seen a dime yet. Brandon had structured it perfectly. He controlled the money, the items, the invoices, everything. The charity was just a front, a name to legitimize his scam, and they didn't even know it. I sat back in my chair, staring at the fake Rolex on my desk. $6,000. How much had he made total last night? 50,000, 100. And how much of that would actually reach the charity? I didn't need to guess. I already knew the answer. Nothing, absolutely nothing. I took the watch to a certified authenticator downtown. The shop was small, tucked between a cafe and a law office. The man behind the counter was older, grey-haired, with decades of experience etched into his careful movements. He took one look at the Rolex and sighed. "Where'd you get this?" he asked, not unkindly. "Charity auction," I said. He nodded slowly, like he'd heard it before. "Let me guess. Brandon Hale." My eyes widened. He gave me a tired smile. "You're not the first person to bring me something from his events." He spent 10 minutes examining the watch under magnification, pointing out every flaw: wrong movement, cheap plating, incorrect serial number format, misaligned logo print. He pulled out his phone and showed me side-by-side comparisons with authentic models. The differences were glaring once you knew what to look for. "Not even a good fake," he muttered, shaking his head. I asked him to document everything on camera, a full walkthrough of every flaw, every inconsistency. He agreed and gave me a signed report on official letterhead. As I was leaving, he called after me. "If you're going after him, be careful. Guys like that don't go down easy." I nodded, but I'd already made my decision. That night I started digging. Reddit, watch forums, luxury resale groups, local collector communities. I posted the same simple question everywhere: anyone else buy from Brandon Hale's charity auction? I didn't expect much, maybe a comment or two. Within 48 hours I had 7 direct messages, then 12, then 20. Every single person told the same story: fake items, no refunds, public humiliation when they questioned authenticity. Some had been scammed months ago and never reported it. Others were still sitting on counterfeit bags, watches and jewelry, too embarrassed to admit they'd been conned. I responded to each one individually, asking for photos, invoices, authentication reports, anything they had. Most people were hesitant at first, ashamed, but when they realized they weren't alone, the floodgates opened. I created a private Signal group and invited everyone. Within a week we had 15 members, 15 people. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in combined losses, and every single one of us had been humiliated by the same man in the same way at the same kind of event. We weren't just victims anymore. We were a network, and we were ready to act. The group shared everything: photos of fake Cartier watches with misspelled engravings, Hermes bags with glued-on logos, Patek Philippe timepieces that stopped working after a week. One guy's limited edition Air Jordan 1s had swooshes that were literally glued on, they peeled off in his hands. But the most damning evidence was the invoices. Every single one was signed by Brandon personally. Not the charity, not an auction house, just him. He'd structured the entire operation to avoid organizational liability. The charity provided legitimacy, but Brandon controlled the money, the items, and the narrative. It was brilliant, really. Diabolical, but brilliant. We compared notes, timelines, locations. He'd been running this scam for at least 2 years, moving between cities, cycling through different charities. Each event was just profitable enough to avoid raising red flags, but not so large that authorities would investigate. He stayed under the radar by keeping victims isolated and ashamed, but he'd made one mistake. He underestimated us. We weren't just angry anymore. We were organized, we had evidence, and we had a plan. I looked at the messages flooding the group chat and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks: hope. I needed more than testimonials and photos. I needed a confession, something undeniable. So I created a fake email account, professional, clean, believable. I posed as a hedge fund executive planning a corporate charity gala for clients. Big money, high profile. Exactly the kind of opportunity someone like Brandon couldn't resist. My message was simple: looking for someone who can source authenticated luxury auction items for an exclusive event. Heard you're the best in Miami. He replied in under an hour. His email was pure arrogance. He bragged about his exclusive supplier network, his white glove service, his proven track record with high net worth clients. He didn't ask questions, didn't hesitate, just assumed I was another Mark. We scheduled a meeting for Friday afternoon at an outdoor cafe in Coral Gables. Public, casual, non-threatening. I confirmed the time and location, then immediately messaged the Signal group. 2 guys volunteered to come with me, sitting at nearby tables with their phones angled just right. This wasn't about confrontation. Not yet. This was about evidence. And Brandon was about to hand it to me himself. I read his email one more time, smirking at the overconfidence dripping from every sentence. His ego was going to bury him. Friday came fast. I arrived at the cafe 30 minutes early, ordered coffee and waited. My hands were steady, my mind was clear. The 2 guys from the Signal group were already seated at separate tables, phones positioned, recording apps ready. Brandon showed up exactly on time, dressed like he was auditioning for a yacht club commercial. Aviators, Breitling watch, probably fake. Golf shirt with the collar popped. He walked with the kind of confidence that came from never being questioned. We shook hands and he launched into his pitch before I even asked a question. 15 straight minutes of bragging. His 7-figure year, his celebrity clients, his unmatched reputation. I nodded along, asking just enough questions to keep him talking. Then I shifted gears. "How do you handle authenticity concerns?" I asked casually, stirring my coffee. He leaned back, smirking. "Honestly, confidence sells more than paperwork." People don't ask questions when you act like you own the room. Bingo. I kept my face neutral, but inside I was screaming. He kept talking, mentioning his direct import pipeline that bypassed unnecessary retail markups. Every word was gold. Every sentence was evidence. I was recording everything on my Apple Watch. That clip alone was worth $6,000. Brandon talked for another 20 minutes, completely oblivious. He thought he was impressing a potential client. He had no idea he was confessing to fraud. When we finally stood to leave, he shook my hand again, grinning. "This is going to be huge," he said. "I'll send over a proposal by Monday." I smiled, looking forward to it. The moment he walked away, I sat back down and exhaled. My hands were shaking now, not from fear, but from adrenaline. 2 guys from the Signal group came over and we reviewed the footage. Crystal clear, perfect audio. Brandon's voice, his face, his words. Confidence sells more than paperwork. That one sentence was everything. I sent the clips to the group chat immediately. The responses came flooding in: shock, anger, validation. We finally had him on record, in his own words, admitting to his tactics, but I knew this wasn't enough yet. We needed someone with reach, someone who could make this public. Someone who could turn our evidence into a story the world couldn't ignore. I opened my laptop and started searching for investigative journalists in Miami who covered consumer fraud. That's when I found Marcus Chen, and everything changed. Marcus Chen was a reporter for the Miami Herald with a reputation for exposing white-collar crime. I spent 2 hours reading his past articles: luxury fraud, charity scams, Ponzi schemes. He was thorough, relentless, and he didn't pull punches. I drafted an email, keeping it concise but compelling. I attached the authentication report, screenshots of invoices, victim testimonials, and the coffee shop recording. Then I hit send. 3 hours later, my phone rang. "This is Marcus Chen." "We need to talk." His voice was sharp, focused. I explained everything: the auction, the humiliation, the fake watch, the network of victims, Brandon's confession. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a long pause. "How many victims are we talking about?" Marcus asked. 15 confirmed, probably dozens more who haven't come forward." Another pause. "And you have all this documented?" "Every bit of it." 40-page dossier. Photos, audio, invoices, authentication reports. I could hear him typing. "This is explosive," he said finally. "But we need more than documents. We need him caught in the act, live, on record, something undeniable." I smiled. "He's doing another auction next month. Same setup, same venue." Marcus didn't hesitate. "Let's finish this." We talked for another hour, mapping out a plan. By the time I hung up, I knew exactly what we had to do. 2 weeks later, Brandon announced his next event on Instagram. The post was slick, professional, photos of luxury items gleaming under studio lights. Exclusive VIP charity gala, luxury redefined, limited tickets available. All proceeds benefit local children's programs. The comments were full of excitement. "Can't wait, this looks amazing. Already got my ticket." The irony made me sick. $300 per ticket. Promises of authenticated Hermes, Rolex, and rare collectibles. The same lies, the same con, just a new crowd. I bought 8 tickets immediately, 1 for me, 6 for members of the Signal group, 1 for Marcus. The group chat erupted with nervous energy. Some people were scared, others were angry. Everyone was ready. We spent the next 2 weeks preparing, reviewing the plan, coordinating timing, making sure everyone knew their role. Marcus worked his contacts, quietly alerting local authorities and ensuring media presence without tipping off Brandon. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about justice, about exposing a predator, about making sure no one else got scammed. The night before the event, I barely slept. I kept replaying Brandon's smug face, his dismissive laugh, the way he'd humiliated me in front of everyone. Tomorrow the tables would turn. Tomorrow he'd be the one exposed. And this time, everyone would be watching. The venue was packed when we arrived. Influencers, local celebrities, real estate moguls, all dressed to impress, all eager to be part of something exclusive. The energy was electric, intoxicating. Brandon worked the room like a politician, shaking hands, flashing his rehearsed smile, posing for photos. He looked like he owned the world. I stayed in the back at first, watching. I'd lost 15 pounds over the past month from stress and sleepless nights. I'd grown a beard. I wore plain clothes, dark jeans, simple button-down, no logos, nothing that would draw attention. Brandon didn't recognize me. He walked right past me twice without a second glance. The Signal group members filtered in separately, spreading out across the room. Marcus sat near the front, voice recorder in his jacket pocket, press credentials ready. The venue manager had no idea what was coming. Neither did the charity representatives seated in the VIP section. And Brandon. He was too busy basking in the spotlight to notice the trap closing around him. When the lights dimmed and he took the stage, the crowd erupted in applause. I felt my heartbeat slow, my breathing steady. No more nerves, no more doubt, just focus. This was it. Brandon's opening remarks were smooth, charismatic. He thanked everyone for coming, praised the charity, promised an unforgettable evening. Then he unveiled the first premium item, a 1960s Omega Speedmaster, the actual moon watch complete with original box and papers. The room gasped. The projected image showed the watch gleaming under dramatic lighting. "We'll start the bidding at $8,000, Brandon announced. Silence. People hesitated, calculating, waiting for someone else to make the first move. I raised my paddle. 15,000. The room exploded in whispers. Brandon's eyes locked onto me, and for a split second I saw confusion flicker across his face. But it vanished instantly, replaced by greedy excitement. 15,000 from the gentleman in row 3. Do I hear 16? Silence. No one else bid. Going once, twice. The gavel cracked down. Sold. Brandon gestured me forward, smiling like I was his favorite customer. The crowd applauded politely as I stood and made my way to the stage. Every step felt deliberate, purposeful. When I reached the podium, Brandon handed me the watch with a triumphant grin. "Congratulations," he said. I looked him in the eyes and smiled back. "Thank you. Now, can I see the original NASA certification and service records?" Brandon's smile froze, just for a second, then he recovered, laughing smoothly. "Of course, we provide all documentation after payment processing. Standard procedure." I didn't move. "I'd like to see them now," I said, my voice calm but loud enough for the microphones to catch. "Let's authenticate it, Liv, for charity's sake." The room went quiet. Cameras turned toward the stage. Brandon's smile twitched. "That's not really how." I pulled out my phone. "Then let me show you something." The screen lit up and I turned it toward the audience. The video played, my original Rolex being examined by the authenticator. His voice echoed through the speaker. "Counterfeit, poorly made, not even a convincing replica." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Brandon's face went pale. "This is ridiculous. That's not." I swiped to the next video. Brandon's voice now, recorded at the cafe. "Confidence sells more than paperwork. People don't ask questions when you act like you own the room." The room erupted. Whispers turned to shouts. Someone near the front yelled, "He sold me a fake Birkin." Another voice, "My Cartier bracelet is fake too." Brandon stepped back, his hands raised defensively. "This is a setup." He switched the items. That's when Marcus stood up, voice recorder in hand, press badge visible. "Mr. Hale, Marcus Chen, Miami Herald. Can you explain these signed invoices from 7 buyers, all authenticated as counterfeit?" Brandon's composure shattered. His eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape, for support, for anything. But the crowd had turned. People were standing now, shouting questions, demanding answers. The venue manager rushed toward the stage, panicked and confused. Marcus climbed onto the platform, folder in hand. "These are sworn statements from 15 victims," he continued, his voice cutting through the chaos. "All purchased items from your charity auctions. All confirmed counterfeit by certified authenticators. And according to the hosting charities, none of them have received a single donation from your events." The charity representative in the VIP section stood up, her face horrified. "What? That's not possible." Brandon assured us. "He assured you nothing," Marcus interrupted, pulling out documents. "These invoices all bear his personal signature. No organizational oversight, no co-signers. He's been running a fraud operation using your charity's name as cover." Brandon tried to speak, but his voice cracked. "You don't understand how the industry works. These are complicated transactions." I stepped closer to him. "I understand perfectly. You sold me a $200 fake for $6,000, then you humiliated me when I asked questions. That wasn't complicated, that was theft." The crowd roared in agreement. Brandon looked at the exits. They were blocked by people demanding refunds, demanding justice. That's when the side entrance opened. 2 Miami-Dade police officers walked in, their presence immediately silencing the room. The lead officer approached the stage, eyes locked on Brandon. "Brandon Hale." Brandon's hands trembled. "This is insane. I'm a legitimate businessman. These people are, sir, we have a warrant for fraud investigation and seizure of evidence. We've been monitoring the situation based on tips from investigative press." Marcus had called them before the event even started. The journalist had coordinated everything, making sure authorities were present, making sure cameras were rolling, making sure this would be documented. Brandon looked at me, then at Marcus, then at the officers. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked small, powerless, human. "This is a misunderstanding," he stammered. "I can explain everything. You'll have plenty of time to explain at the station," the officer said. Brandon tried to run. He actually tried to run. He made it 4 steps toward the side exit before the second officer intercepted him. The crowd gasped as they cuffed him, reading him his rights while he protested weakly. Camera phones captured everything. The fall of Brandon Hale, recorded from a dozen angles, already uploading to social media in real time. I stood on that stage, watching it all unfold, and felt the knot in my chest finally loosen. The aftermath was chaos. Police officers moved through the venue, seizing every item on display: watches, bags, jewelry, art. They tagged and catalogued everything as evidence. Guests swarmed the charity representatives, demanding refunds, demanding explanations. Some people were crying, others were shouting. The venue manager tried to restore order, but it was impossible. Marcus pulled me aside away from the commotion. "Hell of a story," he said, his voice filled with something like respect. I nodded, still processing everything. It's not over yet, he smiled. For him it is, but for you, this is just the beginning. We stood there for a moment, watching as Brandon was escorted out in handcuffs, his head down, his empire of fakes crumbling around him. For months, I'd carried the weight of humiliation, anger, and betrayal. I'd lost sleep, lost weight, questioned myself. But standing there, watching justice unfold, I realized something. I hadn't just exposed a criminal. I'd reclaimed my voice, my dignity, my power. Brandon had tried to make me feel small, insignificant, foolish, but in the end his arrogance had been his downfall, and my refusal to stay silent had been my salvation. The crowd began to disperse, still buzzing with shock and disbelief. I walked out into the Miami night, the fake watch still in my pocket, evidence, a reminder, and a promise that I'd kept. 2 weeks later, the Miami Herald published Marcus's exposé. Front page, digital and print. The headline read, "Charity Con Artist Arrested After Undercover Sting by Victims." The article was exhaustive: photos, documents, victim testimonials, expert analysis. It detailed Brandon's entire operation, the charities he'd exploited, the people he'd scammed. Within hours it went viral. Local news picked it up, then national outlets, then social media exploded with reactions. Brandon's mugshot circulated everywhere, accompanied by hashtags like fake luxury and charity scam. His social media accounts, once filled with glamorous photos and thousands of followers, were deleted or flooded with angry comments before disappearing entirely. The legal consequences came swiftly. Brandon's bank accounts were frozen pending investigation. His assets, cars, watches, designer clothes, everything, were seized as potential evidence or proceeds of crime. The various charities he'd used began their own investigations, hiring lawyers, issuing statements distancing themselves from him. I received a formal apology from the original charity, along with a full refund of my $6,000, but that wasn't the real win. The real win was knowing that 15 victims, now nearly 30 as more people came forward, would get justice. We'd turned our shame into strength, our silence into a movement, and Brandon Hale would never scam anyone again. A production company contacted Marcus 3 weeks after the arrest. They wanted to adapt the story for a true crime documentary series. They'd been following his reporting and were impressed by the depth of investigation, the victim coordination, the dramatic confrontation. Marcus called me immediately. They want interviews, footage, access to everything, and they're willing to pay. I hesitated at first. Part of me just wanted to move on, to put this chapter behind me. But Marcus made a compelling argument. This isn't just about you anymore, it's about prevention, education, showing people how these scams work and how to fight back. He was right. If our story could prevent even one person from being scammed, it was worth it. We negotiated together. Marcus acted as executive consultant. I came on as co-producer with exclusive rights to my recordings, photos, and documentation. The production company was professional, respectful, and genuinely interested in telling the story right. The contract was signed within a week. The check cleared for $35,000. I stared at my bank account, reading the number over and over. $6,000 lost, $35,000 gained, but it wasn't about the money anymore. It never really had been. It was about justice, about standing up, about refusing to be silenced. And now our story would reach millions. Brandon's plea deal came through 2 months later. His lawyer negotiated to avoid trial, guilty plea on multiple counts of fraud, restitution to victims, forfeiture of assets, and a public apology as part of the settlement. The apology was broadcast on local news. I didn't attend. I watched from home with a beer, sitting on my couch in comfortable silence. Brandon appeared on screen, flanked by his lawyer, reading from a prepared statement. His voice was flat, emotionless. I deeply regret my actions and the harm caused to individuals and charitable organizations. I take full responsibility and am committed to making amends. His eyes never left the paper. His lawyer stood rigid beside him, hand hovering near Brandon's elbow like a bodyguard. The whole thing lasted 90 seconds. No questions from reporters. No eye contact with the camera. Just a hollow, legally mandated apology. I turned it off halfway through. He'd already lost everything that mattered, his reputation, his freedom, his carefully constructed image. The apology was just theater. The real justice had already been served. I finished my beer and looked at the fake Rolex sitting on my bookshelf. I'd kept it as a reminder, not of the scam, but of what I'd done afterward, of the strength I'd found, of the community we'd built, of the silence we'd shattered. That watch was worth more to me now than any authentic Rolex ever could be. I used part of the documentary money to launch a YouTube channel called Authenticated. The concept was simple: teach people how to spot counterfeit luxury goods. Watches, sneakers, bags, jewelry, art, anything with a thriving counterfeit market. I bought equipment, learned video editing, and threw myself into research. The first video was about the fake Rolex that started everything. I walked through every detail: the weight discrepancy, the crown alignment, the engraving quality, the movement. I showed side-by-side comparisons with authentic models. The response was overwhelming. 10,000 views in the first week. Then 50,000, then 100,000. People were hungry for this information. Comments poured in with stories similar to mine, people who'd been scammed, people who'd unknowingly bought fakes, people who just wanted to learn. I released a video every week. Hermes bags, Patek Philippe watches, Jordan sneakers, Cartier jewelry. Each one packed with information, demonstrations, expert insights. Within 6 months, I hit 400,000 subscribers. Brands started reaching out, sending me products to authenticate. Authentication services asked for collaborations. The thing that almost destroyed me had become my livelihood, and more than that, it had become my purpose. I was helping people avoid the pain I'd experienced, and that felt better than any revenge ever could. Year after Brandon's arrest, I received an invitation to speak at a consumer protection summit. The venue, the same hotel where the original charity auction had taken place, the same ballroom where I'd been humiliated, where Brandon had laughed at me, where this entire journey began, I almost declined. The thought of walking back into that room, standing on that stage, it felt like reopening a wound. But then I realized something. This was the perfect closure. I accepted the invitation. Day of the summit, I arrived early. The ballroom looked different in daylight, less glamorous, more ordinary. I walked to the exact spot where Brandon had stood, where he'd handed me the fake watch with that smug smile. Now it was empty, just a stage, just a room, nothing more. When my turn came to speak, I walked to the microphone with steady hands and a clear mind. The room was full, consumer advocates, journalists, law enforcement, victims of fraud from various cases. I told my story. Not with anger or bitterness, but with honesty and purpose. I explained how the scam worked, how we organized, how we fought back, and I ended with a message I'd been carrying for months. Real value isn't about the logo on your wrist or the label on your bag. It's about knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone diminish it. The applause was deafening. People stood, clapping, some with tears in their eyes. I stood at that podium looking out at faces full of respect and understanding and felt something profound settle in my chest. Peace. I'd walked into this room a year ago as a victim, humiliated, angry, powerless. I was walking out as an advocate, an educator, someone who'd transformed pain into purpose. After my speech, people approached me with stories, questions, gratitude. Some were victims themselves. Others were journalists, lawyers, consumer protection officials who wanted to collaborate. The documentary was set to premiere in 2 months and the buzz was already building. My YouTube channel was growing daily, and I had speaking invitations from 3 other conferences. I walked out of the venue into the Miami sunshine, and for the first time in over a year I didn't think about Brandon Hale. I thought about the community we'd built, the people we'd helped, the lives we'd changed. I glanced back at the hotel one last time. The spot where Brandon used to stand was still empty, and it would stay that way. As I drove home, I realized something important. I hadn't just gotten revenge. I'd gotten something far more valuable. I'd gotten my respect back, my voice back, my power back, and no one could ever take that away from me again.